All right, it's 8:05. We don't have much time together, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Please keep checking in, dropping where you're from and what brings you here. And we're going to get started with our program for tonight. Might be a little bit of a change up, but we're going to rock with it, and I'll explain that in a bit. Randolph, if you could go ahead and get us started. So I wanted to provide an agenda for tonight so you know what we're going to get done here. First, we're going to ground ourselves, what we're doing, why we're here. B&B has a set of values, and if you rock with those values, you can rock with us. We also are here to build power. We also have a 25th anniversary reprint of the Malcolm X Study Guide by People's College that we're very proud of. This is a part two, so if you haven't caught part one, please go check that out. But we broke it down a little bit more there. We're not going to spend as much time on it this time around, but we will review it. What we're really here to do is to build, to understand Malcolm, his time in Africa, why he went there, what he gained from it, and of course, what he contributed to it. So we're going to have a lot of discussions, a lot of interaction tonight. I want to hear from y'all, and we're going to try and study and learn together. We are going to talk about Malcolm's time in Africa. How we do that, we will figure out in a bit, but let's go ahead and get started with our values pledge. I'm going to read it off. This is how we ground ourselves. This is how people have their first point of contact with Black Men Build. So first and foremost, we are critical thinkers. We are curious about this moment. We are coming together to take an active, responsible role in freeing our communities. We are transforming to meet the moment. And finally, we are bonded with Black women and Black people of all gender identities and fight for true freedom. If you agree with this, please visit blackmen.build/values and scan this to sign our values pledge. So I wanted us to get started tonight with a clip from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. See, we often hear Malcolm and Martin pitted against each other, and though they had different tactics, what we notice is in their lives of transformation, they both started reaching certain revolutionary conclusions. And we know that their lives were ended in assassination, but their lessons live on. So I wanted to get us started here to ground why we do things like this today.
I'm tired of marching. Tired of marching for something that should have been mine at birth. I don't mind saying to you tonight. I don't mind saying to you tonight that I'm tired of the tension surrounding our day. I don't mind saying to you tonight that I'm tired of living every day under the threat of death. I have no martyr complex. I want to live as long as anybody in this building tonight, and sometimes I begin to doubt whether I'm going to make it through. I must confess I'm tired.
I'm gonna need two volunteers for this next section. So if you raise your hand, that's how we like to participate in these Theory Thursdays. I'd be happy to call on you. We're here to study because we're critical thinkers and we have those values, but we do this for a reason. You all could have been anywhere, but you're here because we want to build power. Martin wanted to build power. Malcolm wants to build power. And that's what Black Men Build's here to do as well. Leighton Watson, I see your hand, and if someone could come off uh, mute after raising their hand as well to read, I'd appreciate it. So Leighton, can you get us started with this first quote?
Can you hear me?
We sure can.
Okay. Now, power properly understood is nothing but the ability to achieve purpose. It is the strength required to bring about social, political, and economic change.
Thank you for reading that. And I see someone in the chat say this is new to them. It's new to many of us, as we know there's a war on our history. These things are not taught to us in school, but Dr. King did write a book. So if you haven't read Where Do We Go From Here? I highly recommend you buy that book, download that book, and read it from cover to cover. Could someone else volunteer to come off mute to read this second quote? Lamar, I see your hand, please.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
To us, power is, first of all, the ability to define phenomena, and secondly, the ability to make these phenomenon acts in a desired manner. Apologies for any mispronunciations there.
No apologies needed. Could you explain what you think that means in your own words?
Mhm. The ability to under it'd be tough for me actually.
No problem. And that's what we're here for. Does anyone have an idea of how they would explain this? Because some people get this immediately, and some people it sometimes takes a second. That's no problem. But I wanted to check in on that quote. Does anyone? I see Dennis Martinez raised a hand, and I also see a few others. Dennis, do you have an explanation of this quote?
So if you have the power to define, that's how you create reality. Like, I don't know, like feudalism, if you have the power to define people into classes, into kings, nobles, knights, and peasants, that's in effect how you control them. And then here in America, we do it by race. For example, historically, black people were defined as inherently better at being servile, and that was the justification for the slavery, and they invented like race science and eugenics. So that's what it means to like define reality to can get the conclusions you want.
Thank you. I think that's really fantastic explanation. So you can define race, you can say that black people are inferior, and now this is what a generation of students are reading in a medical textbook. Now there are institutions dedicated to this. Now this is what children learn in church with the curse of Ham. So thank you. That is a pretty great
I,
definition
I
of
would
power.
hello everybody. I would like to add if I can.
I'm sorry,
Hello,
who's speaking right now?
Christopher Carter from
Uh,
Detroit.
sure thing, Chris. Please join in. I'll
Uh,
accept that. Go ahead.
thank you. And the thing is for me, as far as the power to control the narrative to me is that of Americanism, as opposed to being a United States uh, person or proponent, a patriot of that, because Americanism is has everyone thinking about in America and the American Empire, which died to me during the Civil War, and uh, everyone then became United States citizens, as opposed to Americans, because the United States won as opposed to the Confederate States. And realizing that we are first and foremost United States citizens, and that we have been denationalized, a crime according to the United Nations. Um, and also, races are false ethnicities. I mean, we've learned this in school, but no one seems to know what to actually replace it with. And what we replace it with is the blood that's flowing through our veins. And each one of them, you know what I'm saying, regardless of where they're from, at least they tie us back to the nations and flags of the earth. Being a United States citizen ties us to the flag. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
I'm going to pause you here and thank you for
Yeah.
sharing. In fact, I'm going to ask you to read the next quote, just for folks joining us, just to keep the flow smooth and because we want to value everybody's contribution. The hand raising is how I'm going to call on folks.
Okay.
So
I
we
couldn't
want
find.
to keep it smooth like that. But you are getting into this next slide. So Randolph, you could just take us there. And brother, if you could stay off mute and read this. We read last week a quote about power and internationalism, last session, sorry, with Malcolm congratulating China for their revolution, for their independence, and for their nuclear achievements. And so we also want to consider how Malcolm thought about power in his trips to Africa. So can you go ahead and read that quote for us, brother? This one right here on the top of the
Uh,
screen.
okay. When we all learn as human beings instead of as capitalists, communists, and socialists, this will be a world for all human beings. However, it takes some of the same poison to counteract the same as antidote poison. Uh, Euro Europeanism has been such a strong poison for centuries. It now becomes essential to emphasize Africanism to counteract it, and Arabism to counteract Zionism, socialism to counteract capitalism. Thus the present escalating struggle, uh, world struggle, Cold War. Now, can I
No,
uh,
I'm sorry, brother.
okay,
We just
all right.
needed you to read it, but we're gonna have
Thanks.
opportunities in breakout
Yeah, for
rooms and
sure.
things. So keep
Yeah,
this energy. I appreciate
yeah.
it. Now this was in September 24th, 1964, and so what we understand is that Malcolm was an internationalist, as somebody with an international perspective who supported the world's oppressed people. And again, we talked about how Dr. King was moving more toward Malcolm when we saw that speech of him talking about how he's tired, how he doesn't want to be a martyr anymore, and he wants power. Here we see Malcolm is open to this world where we can all think as human beings, similar to the I Have a Dream. But he always grounds this in the reality that Europeanism, white supremacy, colonialism, capitalism have been poisons. And so now we have these forces that are emerging to counteract these poisons as antidote. Next slide, please. So we're going to go through our learning objectives, what you're here to do. And we have this acronym passed down to us by some of our teachers, master teachers, elders, ancestors of SPAR. So what we're going to do is study Malcolm's revolutionary connections in Africa. We're going to practice using a valuable learning tool. We're also practice collective study, assess internationalism and its importance, and then repeat the successful practices of collective study. So that's what you should expect to leave with after today. Next slide, please. If you missed the replay, I think Brother Jeremy just dropped that in the chat. So we have it online. Part one, we reviewed the study guide. We got to hear from Professor James Pope. Unfortunately, Professor Pope will not be able to join us tonight. He's dealing with a family emergency. So we're going to pivot a little bit. We will eventually have him on again because there wasn't enough breakdown on the first part of Malcolm in Kenya. There's just a lot to cover. But for tonight, we're going to have to call audible a little bit. But this is part one for those who missed it. Thank you, Jeremy, for dropping that. Next slide, please. Okay. Knowing that transition there, the study guide, we're going to review it very briefly, but we're not going to spend too much time on it because we covered this last time. But this is a resource. It is a teaching tool. If you are an educator, if you are somebody who likes these community conversations, if you're just somebody who loves knowledge and reading, we highly recommend you use this resource. It's available on Black Men Build's website. You can also email us for any information about it. If you want to set up events, study halls, this is Malcolm X's 100th. It's a centennial. So we wanted to honor him by reprinting the study guide, and we'll be adding to it throughout the year. So in May, we'll have more added to it, and by the end of the year, we'll have a special edition of our publication. This was the original address from Abdul al-Khalima in 1989. Next slide, please. There was also the reprint where Professor James Pope explained what we're doing now, why this existed, what came from that conference, and why we can use it in our present struggle. Moving on. So I'm going to move us through this very quickly. The first things first, this is just a table of contents. I went through this a little more last time. Like I said, catch part one. This is how you can navigate the study guide. We also have a scavenger hunt available. So again, please follow up, email us, contact Black Men Build on social media. However, you can get in touch with us if you want access to this. We got you. Moving on. You get a breakdown of Malcolm and his position in a lineage of struggle, that he inherited struggles, that he was a part of the Afro-American community and the African diaspora more broadly. And there were debates in each period that were animating his life and his struggle. So I definitely recommend you check that out. But we don't just focus on Malcolm as an individual, we focus as Malcolm as a part of a broader struggle. Next slide, please. You'll see Malcolm's four stages. Again, a guide for reading the autobiography and the four stages that he went through as he transformed throughout his life. The period we're focused on today is Malcolm in Africa, and so we use that name Omawale. There's also El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, the name he was given in Mecca. after he completed his Hajj. But Omawale was a name that he was given while traveling in Nigeria by students, and it stands for the child who has returned. And so that's another name we call Malcolm by. Next slide, please. Again, how do you read the autobiography? This study guide gives you an example. It tells you how to read it, how it's broken down, why it's important, that it ranks with the best autobiographies, that Black struggle is a tradition often of autobiography, that text and the tradition as you see here. So you have Frederick Douglass's autobiography, Kwame Nkrumah's, and of course Assata Shakur's, and Malcolm X's fits into that pantheon. Next slide, please. And this is, of course, so you don't look like that when they ask you about the book. We have opportunities for reflection and discussion. We take direct quotes from Malcolm, from speeches and writings, and we offer discussion questions. Again, this is to be brought out into the community. This is for us to practice with. Moving on. And also things of his legacy. Black is Beautiful, African Liberation Day. The Black Panthers are considered the heirs of Malcolm X. And we have the Detroit Revolutionary Union Movement, People's College. Plenty of institutions came from Malcolm X, and they still exist today. And we want to honor those things and remember that they sprung from militant action. Next slide. And then, of course, I mentioned last time, but this is a question many of us who try to create change get. So what do we do? What's all this thinking about? I'm about action. And so, of course, we want to give some principles for action that Malcolm X gave. But what we're also going to talk about tonight is the programs, the things that Malcolm X recommended. You can quote Malcolm X through any of these periods of transformation and get a lot of conflicting views. But when we're talking about Malcolm as he arrived as Omawale, as this international revolutionary, we want to understand what were the principles for action he gave in that period. And so we want to follow his example, spread the word, organize community self-defense, advance the condition of Black women, and build international solidarity, to name a few. And we have examples of how we do that at Black Men Build. Again, we're going to keep moving for the sake of time, but we try and do this through all of our work, both nationally with things like this, but also if you are in a city like Miami, St. Louis, New York, North Raleigh is our brother from BNC checked in. Please tap into our local hubs and get involved. Last time we talked about the immortal contributions of El Hajj Malik El Shabazz Omawale. So we wanted to review those quickly. I'm going to call 3 people. I need 3 hands to come off mute. Each of you will read 2 of these pieces before we move on. So I need some hands. If you feel comfortable coming off mute and reading, there will be 6 bullets in total. So I'm going to need, I see 2 hands already. Fantastic. All right, I see my 3. Brother Berto, can you come off mute and read these first 2 for us?
Peace to the nines.
Peace to the nines.
Put your, ooh, my camera, hold on, something came up over top. Okay. Situated African people properly in world history and society, advocated and practiced armed self-defense in the face of white racist violence.
Brother Berto, you know we've been studying Walter Rodney lately. So what does it mean to situate African people properly in world history and society?
Oh my goodness, thank you for asking. In the context outside of a white lens, a lens of exploitation, but actually knowing our true history, to know that we are communal people. We don't operate in the same fashion. So really, I would say to decolonize ourselves and recognize our contributions to the world, our contributions to society, and contributions to one another, along with being in harmony with nature, and harmony with the universe as well as ourselves. So I would say that.
You all become members. You get to interact with brilliant brothers like Berto who can break things down like that. Thank you. I see Leighton. Can you come off mute for these next 2? And then Jalil, I think you'll cover the last.
Spoke to the truth of our political, economic, and social situation, and the limitation of mainstream methods for seeking justice. Embodied a complete personhood based on powerful challenges and rejections of the standards of masculinity imposed on by colonizers.
Do you feel comfortable breaking down either one of those and what you think they mean or what they mean to you?
Well, well, I think when he says spoke to the truth of our political, economic and social situation and limitations of mainstream methods. I think it's I would I suspect it is in a way to think hard about the real condition of of black people, particularly the working class, particularly the working class who make up who make up the majority who make up the majority of people people in the people in society who sorry
You're fine. You getting it. The
Take,
working
take,
class make
take, yeah, take your time, bro.
it's is to think about the political and economic condition right now of black people, particularly those of the working class who make up the majority of America's working class, and to think about mainstream methods, like say go be organ focus on organizing and working locally, as opposed to just as opposed to what we're told is to mainly vote nationally. So
nailed it. Absolutely. Don't go with the mainstream methods. They don't work. That was what Malcolm was constantly pointing out to us. There's limitations to them. Thank you very much. And of course, Malcolm was sitting on the black working class. He loved what he called bottom of the pile Negroes. That was who he was focused on. Can someone, I see Jaleel, do you feel comfortable reading these last two?
Peace, I got you. All right. Demonstrated a commitment to constant transformation based on study and evidence. That's important. Understood our struggle as that of an oppressed nation in an international fight against colonialism and organized accordingly.
So what do you think either of those mean in your work?
For the last one, so it really makes me think about this framework that I've been in conversation with people about called the Black Belt Thesis. And it essentially frames Black people as an oppressed nation within the nation, right? In understanding that, right, we also know that our struggle is not one of isolation, but it's also connected to the struggles of many different oppressed people around the world, African people, so people who are still our brothers and sisters still on the mainland, but also those in the Caribbean, but also non-African people who are also oppressed, right? People of Asian heritage, Palestinians, right? And so to that last point, it really does a really good job of what the theme of this thing is. This session is internationalism, right? Thinking about how the Black struggle is connected to Black American struggle is connected to so many other struggles internationally, and that liberation for Black people in America is connected to the liberation of all these different other groups from systems of oppression that just don't, again, oppress Black people in isolation, but also oppress many different groups of people around the world.
Thank you. Fantastic. And that is going to be the running theme for tonight. So if you hear it once, you're going to hear it 5 times, 10 times. It's okay, because we need to make sure it's understood, especially in this moment. I appreciate that. Again, these are the kind of things you'll get from our study guide, from reviewing Malcolm, studying his legacy. I also recommend a interview called Legacy of Malcolm X Roundtable on the Charlie Rose Show in 1991, I want to say. That's where a lot of this comes from as well. You get to see Betty Shabazz, A. Peter Bailey, Sister Soldier, a few other people talk about Malcolm. So I'm borrowing this from Comrade Rosemary Mealy. This is a breakdown of Malcolm's life. And again, we want to situate him in a tradition of struggle. Malcolm wasn't a savior or a messiah, even though he was cast that way. He was actually just an ordinary Negro who understood himself as an African and transformed himself into somebody who could give us all those things that we mentioned above. And so it's very important to recognize that his mother and father were Garveyites. So they understood Black consciousness, Africa as their home and their people for many years. Malcolm's mother actually is from Grenada. And so she traveled through Grenada, Canada, before arriving in the US. Malcolm's father is from the Black Belt South. And so Brother Jalil mentioned a little bit about that Black Belt thesis. You're in the right place. We're going to get into that. I appreciate brothers in the comments like St. James pointing out Garveyite followers of Marcus Garvey and his organization. But it's important to, again, remember these things. Remember where Malcolm was situated in time, born in 1925. And we are 100 years out from Malcolm's birth. And though things have changed, many things are the same. Moving forward. One thing that was mentioned in the last slide, I'm glad someone in the comments pointed it out, Malcolm challenging colonizer conceptions of masculinity, patriarchal conceptions of masculinity throughout his life. And though he was not perfect, as we mentioned, he's somebody who's transforming. He's transforming through study and evidence. If you look in the study guide, you'll see that we cover some of his last speeches where, for example, he says, one thing I noticed in the Middle East and Africa, in every country that was progressive, the women were progressive. In every country that was underdeveloped and backwards, it was to the same degree that the women were undeveloped or underdeveloped and backwards. Additionally, Malcolm had a understanding that everyone had a role to play. He was actually shaped deeply by revolutionary women like his mother, Louise, who we mentioned, also his sister, Ella Collins, who mysteriously is not in the Spike Lee Malcolm X movie. Got to wonder why that is. Moving to the next slide. So I told you we're taking from Comrade Rosemary Mealy, Dr. Rosemary Mealy and her work. But Malcolm was very much influenced by Black women, radical Black women, revolutionary Black women, Black communist women. As you can see here, this is a picture of Malcolm X with one of my other favorite revolutionaries, Claudia Jones. And although they never got to meet because they both passed very close to each other, Malcolm's itinerary when he was in London was actually developed by Claudia Jones. So she was controlling some of these trips that we talk about and shaping Malcolm's consciousness.
Take a few minutes to introduce what I want to share with you tonight that'll be a part of this conversation. And that is, I am really, really interested in discussing the life and times of Malcolm as an internationalist from the perspective of his family. Because oftentimes when we have these presentations, we kind of gloss over. Yes, we're going to talk about Malcolm tonight. And yes, his mother was important to him. His father was important to him. But it's more to that. It's more to that. So this journey that we're going to take tonight will also talk about the women, the political women, the revolutionary women, the communist women who were key to Malcolm's political development. And all of that traces back to who he was as a child, So the first thing we want to talk about in this discussion, and I want to just share it with you tonight, and we also have a timeline. You love it? Okay. I love it too. Okay. Sitting and passing this on are three of my young people who I told them, you are going to have to take on this work, this struggle, because I'm not going to be around to do it. And they have answered the call. So Sohini, we have Sohini here, Kayla, and our brother Shaq. Okay? So that's my front. They're holding up my back. Okay. So Malcolm X's political evolution as an internationalist has to bear witness to the question of gender, beginning with his mother. In Jan Caru's book, Ghost in Our Blood, where he has this conversation directly with Malcolm X when Malcolm was in England, in Malcolm's own words, he talked about his mother and the centrality of his mother in his development. And that goes back to the Marcus Garvey movement. It goes back. So internationalism, which imbues race, racial identity, and liberation politics, we have learned And those of you who were in the study program, we have learned that Black nationalism and has an interrelationship from the inception. Black nationalism, quote, has always had an international component. It's always had an international component. So to talk about Malcolm X as the internationalist, we go back to his mother, his family, and to the Garvey movement.
The first thing we want to understand is Malcolm was grounded by the legacy of struggle, as I've been saying before, and it was an international one. He understood how we had to think locally, organize locally, but as we've mentioned a few times with this word colonialism, he understood that that's an international process, that our enemies have international allies. And so we need an international struggle. Next slide, please.
Take a few minutes to introduce what I want to share with you tonight.
And this is a quote from A. Peter Bailey, a founding member of the OAAU. Him and William Sales have excellent breakdowns of Malcolm's legacy and his work. And I would like to just read this quote briefly to understand why Malcolm was a material threat. Yes, his ideas were threatening, but it's oftentimes they try and cast it like it was just the ideas, or it was just that he was a strong leader or just a black man, but there was an actual material threat he was posing, which is why he was followed by the CIA, why he was assassinated by a combination of the state and local forces, things of that nature. He considered us a world-class people. When Brother Malcolm met with the Organization for African Unity in 1964, he was the only Afro-American that sat in on that conference. As a direct result of that, in 1964, when the UN debate occurred on the Congo, ministers from Guinea and Ghana compared what was happening in Congo to what was happening in Mississippi. He laid that foundation at the OAU meeting and internationalized our struggle. We'll hear a little bit more
To
about
understand is
that
that
right now.
he first tests at home before he goes abroad. And by what I mean by that, when he's meeting with people, like when he goes to the Audubon, we're moving kind of fast forward, when he goes to the Audubon, he's having a meeting with Jesse Gray, for example, who was an incredible housing organizer in Harlem. And this is after he comes back from one of his international speeches. But he's really talking about what he's experienced internationally and how we need to have this connection with Africa, Asia, Latin America. I mean, his whole understanding of what's going on in Palestine. And Jesse Gray, who's a housing organizer, says to him, Malcolm, let's talk about what's going on here. And he says to Jesse, because he's getting ready to invite Babu, who is a socialist, a communist, who had a lot of influence on him. He's saying you cannot talk about what's going on here unless you link it to what's happening internationally. So he's telling people here at home, we have to make these connections, and I think that that's so important because oftentimes we want to isolate out, and we used to hear it. Why should we be concerned about what's going on over there when we have to deal with here? But Malcolm teaches us that there is this global connection, but first he has to educate people in this country, and I think that is so important, and that's something that I really like to do in my own organizing. That's a skill that we learn in our own organizing, that you cannot talk about Cuba unless you find some way to link that to healthcare in the U.S. or the disparities here. I mean, it's break it down like that, So.
No, this is really important thinking. I think that the term that's so important here is the colony, right? Mm-hmm. What Malcolm understands is that, and this becomes Black Panther orthodoxy, right? That Black people in this country are colonial subjects, and the colony is exactly what the lexicon that says the inner city is actually saying the colony. And so when he understands that, so he's thinking about colonialism, which is an international problem, an international scourge that he sees expressing itself and coercing Black people in this country in the same way that it's doing it in other places. So that immediately puts him in that conversation, right? Because the colony becomes the common term here. And so you can't understand Black America without understanding that that we have been colonized and remain colonized people. Then situating yourself in a larger decolonial movement automatically gives you the kind of breadth and depth of argumentation that Dr. Mealy's talking about, right? And so without that common language, and then the term common becomes important, right? Because Malcolm,
Sorry, I think it's overflowing. You can move it.
those
So we definitely want to remember that term colonize, and it's going to ground this discussion that we're about to move into. So we're going to get into some breakout rooms, and we're going to have a conversation. Um, but we want to remember this discussion of colonized. Again, Malcolm's really clear when you hear inner city, urban, even the things that oppress us, racism, white supremacy, people of color, minorities, black and brown, the word is colonized. And so Malcolm makes it very clear that colonialism, the colonized nature of our people is what we're trying to fight against. And that is his basis. That is what the Black Panthers inherit. That is what Malcolm inherits from Claudia Jones, people who are his elders in struggle as well. And so what we want to talk about now is we're going to move on to this discussion. Let's hear this quote from Malcolm. Now, he gets a caller. This is during an interview in 1964. So if you remember his periods, this is Omowale, traveled throughout Africa, has this international consciousness. And here's what he has to say when a caller hits him with something I'm sure many of us on this call have heard before.
Implying as to why I would think that this country, this good country as she described it, is so bad, and at the same time, why don't I leave? Implying as to why I would think that this country, this good country as she described it, is so bad, and at the same time, why don't I leave? It's easy for me to leave, and I doubt that there's any country on the African continent in which I couldn't live, other than perhaps South Africa, and I frankly believe I could live there. I could live there because I would stir up our people there and try and bring about a change, and not nonviolently. Anytime you comprise 11 million of the people and you only got 2 million people who are a minority ruling you, it's only because you have the wrong philosophy. So insofar as going someplace else and living someplace else, that's very easy for me to do. But at the same time, I have to take into consideration that our people collectively have a problem here. And me being able to go someplace and live comfortably and happily, I don't think that I could ever do it. My mind couldn't rest as long as I knew that our people were still in this country being bitten by police dogs and brutalized by the clubs of police and washed down the sewer by the fire hoses of the people in this good country, as she calls it. So when I was in Accra, I met many Afro-Americans who were over there who had been very strong fighters while they were in this country. And they had escaped. They went over there as expatriates, as exiles. And they were living very happy. They were some of the most progressive people here. They're over there now in Ghana living happy. So I actually insulted them because I was asking them, how could they know that our people in this country are catching...
Keep it plain. I don't know why I cut off there. I'm sorry.
Implying as to why I...
Is that okay?
Hell, all of us are catching hell. And just...
A little further back. I don't know why that...
Or the problem has not been solved for anyone.
Oh.
Implying many Afro-Americans who were over there who had been very strong fighters while they were in this country. And they had escaped. They went over there as expatriates, as exiles. And they were living very happy. They were some of the most progressive people here. They're over there now in Ghana living happy. So I actually insulted them because I was asking them, how could they know that our people in this country are catching... As to why I would think...
Sorry. Okay, I guess it's bugged. I'm sorry, y'all, but we'll keep moving and we'll go into these breakouts now about the discussion. So point here that Malcolm makes at the end is he says he shamed Africans who were Afro-American and living in Ghana and actually encouraged them once they moved to go to set up offices for the diaspora in Ghana so that they could fight there. And they actually learned that strategy from Angolans and South Africans who were present in Ghana at the same time. So this idea of learning strategies from the rest of the diaspora is important. You notice Malcolm mentioned South Africa, so we already knew, those of us who are aware that apartheid know what was going on down there. And so South Africans would go to Ghana or go to another country in Africa and would still be fighting for South Africans while in that country. And so Malcolm encouraged Afro-Americans in Ghana to move over there and to keep fighting for the U.S. here. I think that's very different than some of the people going to Ghana now and how that's looked for the diaspora in this era. That'll close us out. So what is Black nationalism? Again, I want to hear it. We've heard it. If you're hearing the same thing over and over again, that is good. That's good education. We're trying to make it sink in because this is very key to understanding what Black nationalism is. Black nationalism and its relationship to Pan-Africanism. Okay. So Dr. Betty Shabazz states, Black nationalism stood for the unity and dignity of Black people everywhere. Malcolm recognized Black people in America will never be free until Africa is free, and that the freedom of the African people depends on the freedom of the Afro-American. He showed us that no Black person can consider themselves free as long as there exists one enslaved Black person in the United States, Angola, South Africa, Rhodesia, Cuba, Brazil, and anywhere else in the world. He emphasized that Afro-Americans and Africans were one, not only sharing a common heritage, but also a common destiny. Brother Malcolm's uncompromising demand of his fellow Afro-Americans is that they take the Afro-American struggle out of a domestic civil rights issue and put it in its proper context as a human rights struggle, and so internationalize it and thereby seek redress before the nations of the world. This uncompromising demand is one of the most far-reaching and crucial departures from the objective of the established civil rights leaders. These leaders represent the concluding phase of an important era. Malcolm, the beginning of a new era. So we want to think about that new era, some figures who represent that Black nationalism, that revolutionary Pan-Africanism, like Claudia Jones, Assata Shakur, ancestor Kwame Nkrumah, and of course, Kwame Ture. Next slide, please. This kind of collective study takes support, it takes resources, it takes work, and we would love if you could contribute to that work, whether it's through tapping in to events like this, but also financially. Your donation helps us build more hubs around the country. Like I mentioned, I'm out of Miami. We have hubs in New York, St. Louis, LA, and we're trying to build more. It helps us pay some of our sisters and brothers who do this hard work and increase the distribution of our publication Wartime and also publications like that study guide. So if you would like to donate, please, you have this on your screen. I'm also going to drop a link in the chat to donate to the organization. But we appreciate any contribution at all. Really helps this work move forward. There is a B&B in Detroit, Jonas. In fact, looking at the chat, so you already have some homework. Go ahead and check us out. Black Men Build Detroit. You can also become a member. There's local memberships at places that have hubs, but not everywhere has a hub yet. And so you can also become a national member where you'll have to pay dues like the rest of us, attend member orientation, sign our values pledge, and participate in 3 mass calls. And we'll get to those when we close out. But if you're interested, blackmen.build/membership, or you can scan the QR code on the screen right now. B&B Bulbancha is coming, Elgin. B&B New Orleans is on its way. Unfortunately, Professor Pope wasn't able to join us tonight. Please send your thoughts, prayers, well wishes to his family. But he is a contributor to Africa World Now project. So we highly recommend you check it out because even though he couldn't be here to deliver it tonight, James works day in, day out trying to keep these resources accessible to the community. So you can just go on his website and hear direct audio interviews of some of these revolutionaries that we're talking about, resources, papers, journals, strategies that Africans were working on around the world to move us forward. So I highly recommend, please check out James's work elsewhere. I'm going to try and move through what he was going to cover tonight briefly. I do not have the expertise to lay it out, but we were going to cover Malcolm's trip in Africa. And you can see some of the places he visited, Tanzania, Ghana. Quick trivia, but at the first slide where you saw Malcolm with that woman was actually Maya Angelou, who's present in this photo in those pearls over there you see on the left side. And it was not in Kenya, but it was in Ghana. He met Maya there. He met Shirley Graham Du Bois. So he was meeting a lot of radical Afro-Americans in Africa as well. So Tanzania, we already mentioned Nigeria, where he received the name Omowale, the child who has returned. He speaks favorably of his time in Egypt, and also not pictured here, very important, was his trip to Gaza and Palestine. We again got to speak to the impact of the Mau Mau, who are actually called the Kenya Land and Freedom and Land Army, sorry, or Land and Freedom Army. I might have said that out of order, but yes, the KLFA were their official name. The Mau Mau was a name that was given to them. Its origin is questionable, but it also is used to obscure the fact that they were a highly organized, sophisticated political movement. The Kenya Land and Freedom Army, also known as the Mau Mau, carried out massive worker strikes, paralyzing the British Empire. They formed military units to resist British colonizers, expanded the oral tradition through new music, developed independent newspapers in Kenyan languages, and carried out popular education efforts, ultimately leading to Kenya's independence. Why did Malcolm call for us to form a Mau Mau in the USA? Because these strategies are effective elsewhere. And if you want to follow up more on that work, I recommend you check out the reflections of Didan Kimathi, famous leader in the Mau Mau movement, and also Gerald Horne's work, Mau Mau in Harlem. Again, the Mau Mau had a global impact, and we can learn from their strategies then, and we learn from them today. Next slide, please. So I will leave this to Professor Pope to speak about next time, but Malcolm did meet some key figures when he visited Kenya. Next slide. Some of those listed are Pio Gama Pinto, an Indian revolutionary who was also a Kenyan nationalist. Again, to this point about internationalism, oppressed people around the world, fighting British colonialism. The British were quite a few places, just like they are now, and just like we know the U.S. is now. Abdul Rahman Muhammad Babu, socialist, Pan-Africanist thinker who was very influential to Malcolm, as you saw Malcolm smiling as he worked with his comrade and learned from him. And also Jaramogi Odinga. And as you'll see, Pio Gama Pinto and Didan Kimathi have some very early death dates, and that is not from natural causes, but that is from their assassinations at the hands of the state. What we're going to focus on with our remaining time is the organizational outcomes of Malcolm's trip. We discussed the Organization for African Unity and how that came about in Africa, the United States of Africa, Pan-Africanism, uniting to form a socialist collective that controls our resources. That was the goal of the African movement on the continent, and Malcolm brought that back and organized the Organization for Afro-American Unity. And as you see here, it says Malcolm X, founder of the OAAU on the bottom right, and Ella Collins, sister of Malcolm X. We can debate some of the patriarchal framing here because Ella Collins was not just the sister of Malcolm X. Ella Collins, in her own right, was a radical organizer, a thinker, somebody who put clothes on Malcolm's back when he was a child, and also became the leader of the OAAU after Malcolm's assassination. Again, speaking to maybe why she was mysteriously left out of Spike Lee's movie. The OAAU gave a program, a political program for Black nationalism with certain aims and objectives and a platform for action. So oftentimes, like I say, when we mention Malcolm, it's kind of abstract. You might hear his speeches, you might hear his ideas. He might be used as the symbol of Black masculinity and self-defense, or when you see him with the mirror with that, or sorry, at the window with that rifle. But he gave us some very specific directions to move toward. And what I would like us to do now is evaluate whether we're on that trajectory or not. Most of us haven't seen even these aims and objectives, so this will be an opportunity to look at those. But these were built by the best and brightest of our people. Elders like John Henry Clark, A. Peter Bailey, who you saw earlier, Ella Collins, were involved in this organization, and here was their plan. Next slide. So I want us to briefly listen to the 4 minutes of Malcolm's founding rally. It's going to be a good summary for what we've been talking about tonight. I don't know how much time we're going to have. In fact, I think we're going to skip this since we have about 10 minutes left. So we'll move past this, but I highly recommend you check it out. Here, Malcolm says a lot of what we've been talking about tonight, even addresses some of the questions I've seen in the chat. So please check it out. What we're going to do now is split into 5 breakout rooms, and we're going to try and do this with 7 minutes I'm going to put on the clock for us to discuss these pillars. Malcolm had 5 pillars. The OAAU, I should say, it wasn't Malcolm individually, had these 5 pillars that they called the Basic Unity Program. It consisted of restoration, reorientation, education, economic security, and self-defense. So what I'm going to do is drop a paragraph from that platform. I'll just drop the link first of all. And we're going to discuss what he recommended, what the OAAU recommended, and how that looks in our communities today. So we'll break up into these rooms. I'll put them in order. And I'll give you information about each of these categories and what the OAAU's aims and objectives were for each. I'm going to close this out, y'all. So we won't have too much time to share out yet. But take this offline. Take this to your community. If you are in a Black Man Build hub city, take it to your hub. Start talking about this. Many of us have not seen. There are some very explicit. I think y'all saw some explicit uh, directions, right? Directive goals, goals for action that quite a few of the so-called Black leaders, as Malcolm would call them, do not follow in this era. So we want to be clear on a point of direction on what do we do. With that being said, I'm going to close this out for today. Thank you all for Thank you for coming to Black Men Build. We have some upcoming events. If you enjoy this, you'll definitely enjoy next week's African Diaspora Origin Myths. We'll have some breakouts. We'll be joined by Brother Omawale. Last week, we talked about this fact or cap, the myth that we were the original Native Americans and our history through the African diaspora. So that's next week. We're going to do a part 2, cover some more of these myths, how were there slavery without slave ships was when we covered last time. So we'll just do a little bit more of those. They're very important. On April 30th, that is the last day of the month, Wednesday, 8 p.m., we have a mass call, Walter Rodney, grounding with our brothers, but really grounding with all our people. We're trying to be clear about Walter Rodney's legacy and why it is relevant to this moment right now. Additionally, if you like events like this, if you want a chance to meet in person, to connect, the National Black Radical Organizing Conference is coming May 30th through June 1st, Butler University, Indianapolis, Indiana. Quite a few of the brothers you see on this call will be there, in addition to many more. So please feel free to come through. I'm going to drop the tickets right there. But if you go on Community Movement Builders, their website, you can also access the tickets there. I appreciate everyone for coming through tonight. As we like to say, peace to the nines. And if you would like to build with us, sign our values pledge, become a member, make a donation. All that information is here. Thank you all for coming through tonight. Peace, love, be safe.
Love to the nines.